Test 1, 2, 3. around and hit somebody in the face who you don't know. If you're capable of that, please introduce yourselves to them. Introduce yourself. This is very churchy, actually. Introduce yourself. Excellent. Now we are all friends. Okay, a few quick announcements before we get going. Okay, settle down, class. Okay, so a few quick announcements. There has been discussion about people helping us with meetups, and I think you know who you are. So the announcement for you is, feel free to bring your lunch with you, but second floor, the kind of genius bar room, right, Leslie? Oh, the lounge. Yeah, so the second floor lounge is where you guys are going to meet at 12:40. So time could be tight there. Feel free to bring your lunch. Couple of quick things. The video archive thingy that is $149 and includes a ticket for next year's conference. Yep, and that's $149, but only while here. It goes up to $199 the moment you walk out the door. So we get great feedback about these. People love them, and they're worth having. So please, please, please. And this is more important than ever, the feedback form. It's in front of you. We really do read all of these, and it helps our annual event to get better and better. But it also, it helps us now decide what to do at the regionals. And those have been a great success thanks to your feedback. So moving on with the morning, I was just thinking, before I introduce the next speaker, I was thinking how SEO has changed from over the years. I think 2004, the conference, everything was SEO, SEO, SEO. In 2000, I released a product called Search Engine Killer. Did anybody use that? Woohoo! Search Engine Killer. So back in those days, it was all about tricks and tricks and tricks, and we're not about tricks anymore. So I'm very happy to welcome Russ Hudgens, who's going to talk to us about content marketing and the impact on SEO of e-commerce. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. First question, just to give some context, I would like to know, how many people are practicing search or SEO in some capacity day to day? How is your day-to-day job? How many people consider themselves SEOs? So not a whole ton. So how about the other percentage? How many people are getting a significant portion of their traffic through search, and it's an important capacity for your business? So most of you, okay. So just want to give some context to how advanced or not to get with this topic. So as we talked about, it's not 10 years ago, e-commerce or content marketing for search was a more kind of, really content marketing didn't exist at all. It was just get links in any capacity to your site, however you can get those links. As long as they're pointing at product pages, that's going to pass value for you. The reality is today, you have to do more real business activity in order to have sustainable rankings on the web. And because of that, more people are investing in content marketing. And for example, if you just want to see the slides, follow along. I drop a lot of different links throughout this, so this will be useful if you want to grab it. Also, we'll be sharing that on the hashtag later as well. So, sorry, it's an awkward transition, but to give you some context for myself, I run a content marketing agency in San Diego, and we work with a lot of e-commerce companies, medium, large size, and we came from that background of doing the link building to just get links to the product pages and to the homepage, and whatever domain authority was realistic and needed to rank is what we would do. But reality is that changed. Penguin changed that for all of us, and with that, we've changed to a world of creating content that creates real business value, drives sales, drives emails, and all of those things. So that's a little bit about me. To go back into what I was talking about up front, is content marketing, because of those transitions, is becoming a huge growth area for people. You can look at the trends on Google, and you can see all of a sudden content marketing was at this flat line, all of a sudden saw explosive growth. And there's no surprise that it correlates very well with that Penguin 1.0 kind of event that forced people to start thinking about how can we actually do this the right way. And as you can see, people are creating more and more content than they ever had before. They're up from last year. Similarly, if you look at the weekly numbers, it's the same thing. People are publishing daily in many BDC companies. They're publishing multiple times a week in many of these BDC companies. And a lot of the people I don't think are necessarily getting a lot from that, despite the fact that everyone's moving very quickly to that realm. And similarly, with that connection, there's naturally going to be an increase in budget. Everyone's throwing resources and money. And reality is we're all fighting this land grab for page views and eyeballs and distribution that makes it increasingly difficult as we all try and make our way through this funnel, this ocean of content that's out there that we still need to find a way to differentiate ourselves with in order to get links and traction and business and all that stuff. So with that connection of growth is reality that most of these people are doing it, but they're jumping off the cliff without a parachute. They don't know exactly what they're doing. There's so many people that are publishing and not seeing results, or they're just publishing and they think that's the end goal, is to hit publish without measurement, without understanding how that's really impacting the bottom line. So what's coming from that is now people are now reporting, hey, we can't figure out why our content isn't doing anything. It's not effective. We're not getting as much engagement as we'd like. We are very basic. We just have very mundane content that is basically unidentifiable from any other content on the web, and that causes problems. There's an influx of all this content, but the reality is not differentiated, and if you're not differentiating, you're going to have problems in terms of long-term sustainable success in this new world of content marketing. And this is the kind of thing I see. So if you look at your sharing numbers on your site and the publishing frequency on your site, and you're seeing share numbers in this kind of range, under 10, under 1, and this is a consistent number that you're hitting, you should not be publishing, because I'm very confident you're not seeing much, if anything, from this process. You're probably just thinking, or you read somewhere that we should publish. Content helps SEO. And the reality is just publishing a lot of content without any aim towards the metrics is quite the opposite. You can get hit by Panda. The investment's not going to get you anything. So I think to have more return, you need to think beyond this and actually have KPIs and goals from all the content that you're publishing, and when you have posts that are going like this, step back, reconsider, and hopefully set new standards that are higher for yourself and the content that you're publishing. And coming back to the search side of things, reality is that content you develop, if you want to rank for all your product page keywords, all those important keywords that are really going to drive results for you, there has to be links into the content, or there needs to be a connection. Not every piece of content you put out needs to, of course, have connections back to links, but if you're really trying to build the authority of your site, you need that connection. It still has a very prominent place in the search results in ranking factors. Search metrics, their ranking factors saw it as the third or fourth most important of all their ranking factors, with a strong correlation of the pages ranking well also had a lot of links. So it's still a thing that you should be thinking about links and aiming to build them with the content you develop. But the problem is, if you're only thinking about links, I think it also leads you the wrong direction. You're not really building your business in the right way. You're not setting the right KPIs. You're not building a flywheel. And those kinds of link-only thought processes also result in this kind of end game where people end up getting penalized. Their business, they're not building efficiency. They're not lowering their costs and all of those things. So in this presentation, I'm going to basically get into the 2 points, the pain points that I just discussed, is content creation, and then how do you distribute the content to not just hit publish on your site and then wonder why nothing has happened, why you have no shares, why you have no traction, why your search rankings aren't going up. And then the distribution side of how do we get people to see this. It's not as simple as hitting publish and putting it on Twitter and Facebook, because for most people without massive social accounts, that's really not going to do much for you. So I think the biggest thing and the thing I'm most excited about in the content marketing and SEO world is the combination of content creation tied back to top of the funnel brand awareness. So what that means is essentially educating consumers on things they're trying to solve for. So REI is a company that does this extremely well. For example, they make this page on how to use a stand-up paddleboard and the basics of stand-up paddleboarding, which is a growing kind of niche topic. And tons of people search for this specific topic. And they don't have the intent to buy at that given time, but the awareness of REI before they might possibly buy the paddleboard is a huge top of the funnel brand awareness trigger. And there's also tons of search volume tied into this specific topic. And secondarily, they can also drive links to this page. So they can drive search traffic to an educational topic, drive brand awareness, drive links, and then that will bring them down to the actual searches of stand-up paddleboards or stand-up paddleboard, the best stand-up paddleboards. That's a huge driver of potentially massive growth for them, for you, and for many businesses like them out there. So how do you prove the worth of this? And how do you know that I'm just not speaking out of my butt basically on this? You do research. So SEMrush is the tool I'm going to mention a lot on this. It's semrush.com. It's my most powerful tool for content marketing research, SEO research, and all of those things. So if you take that paddleboarding URL and you dump it into SEMrush, you can see the hypothetical value of this piece for REI. And you can see almost 19,000 people are searching for this topic and landing on this page per month. And that's more powerful than the kind of traditional just searching for stand-up paddleboarding. It doesn't really, with these tools, you can put a URL in there, get the full value of all the long tail keywords as well, versus just the head term, which is valuable, but it sometimes will not give you the real context for what it's worth. And you can tie it also back into monetary value. So you can have an idea that, hey, we should probably spend $10,000 building some really great resource on stand-up paddleboarding because we know the lifetime value is going to be exponentially greater. So if you put this in here as well, you can see in the bottom left, there's a traffic cost metric of $45,000 a month. So what that means is that people are willing to bid that much in clicks through PPC for the same traffic they're ranking for in SEO. So what SEMrush just does some math based on what people are bidding on to give you a value of what realistically you might be able to monetize from a piece of content like this. So if you can think about that kind of calculations, it makes it a lot easier to invest in content and know that there is lifetime, longer term value from stuff like this. And you can see it's working for REI. They invested in this earlier. They're one of the earliest e-commerce proponents of content marketing, top of the funnel brand awareness. And then you can go to their learn section on their site, and they have so many great resources for learning how to set up a tent, what to do a camping list, as we'll get into, and things like that. So to do that for your own business, basically go to SEMrush and start putting in keywords that you think might make sense for your business, what people might want to be educated on, what you potentially could build content for, and it will give you related keywords, it'll give you phrase match keywords, and you can start seeing the different metrics that apply to it. As you can see there, there's volume, but there's also cost per click, which just goes back to that traffic cost metric that you can connect back and add value to creating this kind of content. And once you have the topic, it's also important that you need links, because links, of course, are the driver to make these rank, and also will secondarily, if you build links to these, your main pages, the stand-up paddleboarding product page, will actually be able to rank indirectly. So how you do that is take these same keywords, search for them on Google, have Moz's Open Site Explorer tool. So Open Site Explorer is a free tool. They have a toolbar if you just search for Moz toolbar, and it will give you an overlay on any search result to see how many links these pages have. So if we look, for example, of camping list, we can see there's 40 links and 20 links to those top, or actually 91 links to those top 2 results. And what that means is people are trying to solve for this problem and also linking to this problem, because it's not always the case that something has high search volume and is also linkable. So if you can combine these two, you're going to see massive lift across your site. But if you only have one, you'll probably just get that traffic and not get the secondary benefit of domain lift as well. So once you've done that and you can do these different searches, it goes back to that first metric. You can grab that REI site ranking #1, and instead of just looking at the value of camping list, you can see all the keywords that page is ranking for to make a guess that this topic as a whole has this kind of value. So we can see the camping list page, just a brand awareness page for all their camping products, has 24,000 searches a month, and it has a monetary value potentially of 28,000 a month. So not a bad number for a big business, for any business, to have that kind of top of funnel awareness that will drive them to buy products throughout their purchase life cycle. So the final part of this is not as simple as doing keyword research, knowing it has links, and basically putting it up on your site and suddenly you're going to rank. The reality is that's not the case. You need authority to your site. Not everyone has REI's giant, massive business. But on an individual level, we can all compete for each of these topic areas, especially if it has a specific focus that your business is an expert in. So how you do that is with the skyscraper technique. This is it's a pretty basic concept. You can read more on Brian Dean's website, which is Backlinko. But the main concept is essentially you look at that #1 ranking site, the #2 ranking site, and then you ask yourself, how can I improve this resource further? How could this be better? And normally how we answer that is maybe better expert advice. Maybe we can make it more in depth. Maybe we can make it look better. Maybe we can add interactive functionality. Maybe we can add functions to email themselves. Maybe we can make it responsive. Maybe we can update the overall, maybe it's outdated. All those things are potential value adds to jump that site and make the most valuable resource, because that's necessary to be able to get the kind of links that are needed to jump those sites in the search results, because it's not enough to just publish a camping list. You have to be better than REIs, and for sure that is no small effort in order to do that. So although I mentioned the top of the funnel, brand awareness, educational opportunity, it's the reality that not everyone has that. It doesn't make sense for every business. Personalize, like if you're in a personalization mall, you unfortunately can't educate people on how to personalize things. It's not, you're going to cannibalize your own products. They're going to make it themselves instead of buying it. So it's not every business has that kind of educational content. There's always something that you could build that appeals to your specific consumer. Unfortunately, it just doesn't tie into everyone. That doesn't mean content marketing still doesn't have a ton of value though. It's just you have to do things differently. I think to get ROI in that capacity, and really any capacity, but in this one especially, you have to be thinking about the flywheel. And this flywheel concept is essentially that every time you put out a piece of content, the next time it should be that much easier to distribute it. What that means is you get more followers, you have more email signups, you have more links to your site, you have more people on Twitter that follow you. All of this happens with a good content marketing process that is properly set up to capture those people and put them into your marketing lifecycle. But if you don't have that flywheel properly set up or are not thinking about the flywheel, it's less likely and you're more likely to see less return from your content marketing efforts. So the kind of secondary call to actions that are necessary to get ROI from content marketing, even if you're doing top of the funnel or you're not doing top of the funnel, the main one is going to be email marketing. It's email signups. It has such value in e-commerce. And this is just one example. MailChimp, very big brand that I'm sure most of you have heard of. They do a nice pop-up that asks for your email when you go to their blog. And this doesn't make sense for everybody. I don't necessarily recommend the pop-up in all instances. If you have a brand that's well thought of, you potentially can get a lot of signups this way. But if you generate good content that's just top of the funnel awareness, and then you can get them into your email list with a call to action like this, you can get secondary value versus just expecting links or brand awareness and all of those things. Other ways you can get value, your social links and social following links should always be in the peripheral vision on your content that you're publishing. That's not bottom of the funnel transactional. So on MailChimp, they have it in the footer. Other sections normally is in the header. They have it in their sidebar. It's a little low on their blog. I would recommend you actually have it above the fold in the peripheral right when someone lands on the site. So once they get into your content and they're really enjoying it, they can think, oh, I should like them on Facebook. Oh, I should follow them on Twitter. Whatever makes sense in the capacity for your business. Other things that I've seen businesses get secondary value out of through content marketing for the secondary call to action. One is related linking, is basically taking related products that are semantically connected to whatever your blog post is about, and having that in the sidebar, having it after the content. You don't want to be in your face with it in the content, or it's going to have less distribution potential because it's more commercial. But if you have it, again, in the peripheral vision, they could be thinking about it. They have a positive brand expectation or brand feel for you after you've educated them, after you made something entertaining. This kind of, they might possibly browse through your site and then buy something. And again, circling back to the email, super powerful. I think above the fold in the sidebar is a really smart place to put a call to action. I specifically, for e-commerce business, you need a good offer, or any business, you need a good offer to really give people a reason to sign up. And one of the most powerful ones is probably a discount code. You could offer 15 to 20% off if that's the kind of thing that you could offer on your site. And that's going to enable people that are fans of your business to actually sign up, versus maybe they were just on Facebook before or just on Twitter, and then you market to them and they see, oh, there's a discount code, that they get a one-time discount code through signing up. That can be a powerful element to get people into your long-term email marketing campaign, and hopefully quadruple or greatly outgain whatever minor loss you gave from offering them a discount code. Something that really resonates in the e-commerce space is infographics. You've probably heard of them. Visual do very well. They do specifically well in e-commerce because Pinterest is generally a good comparable or compatible space for most e-commerce businesses, because there's a lot of e-commerce shopping happening there. And on Pinterest, it's reality that images that are taller do better. It's because they take up more bandwidth in the timeline, therefore are more likely to be engaged with. So infographics, which in general people love to look at, share, all those things, tie in really well with Pinterest, specifically for e-commerce, which makes it an even more attractive option, I think, for a lot of businesses. And when you're building those, to tie it back into the search side of things, the building links, earning links kind of thing, I suggest adding an embed code. So what an embed code does is when they scroll down, they've seen your infographic, it will lower the friction to them publishing it on their own site. Instead of having to download it, to insert it to the WordPress site, to have to do that all laborious process, all they would have to do is click this embed code box and then Control-V it into their WordPress or whatever their CMS is, and suddenly you have your infographic posted and potentially a link back to your site. And it's just much likelier that someone will actually post it and share your content. It's a very easy thing to do. We have a tool that makes it easy to build an embed code. It's free, easy to use. Just input the different details about your infographic, and it'll generate the code that you can put below the fold after your infographic, and that'll get you more links and shares and all that good stuff. Another thing that I like that ties in well with B2C businesses, e-commerce businesses, is surveys. And this surveys, traditionally people think of them, they're very expensive. You can spend thousands to 5,000 on a good survey, but Google has basically made it so much easier to create surveys that are marketable and actually useful, because they have a new service, Google Consumer Surveys, where you could get marketable survey data for about $100. And you can go up to 500. We sometimes do surveys for 500, depending on what kind of questions you ask. But you can ask consumers and get responses for as little as that much, 1,000 responses for $100. And the way they're able to do that is essentially a paywall behind content. The only way you can see the content is you answer a survey question. So if you can tie that into some interesting thing that you could potentially market to news sites, blogs, whatever, or even use it to make your own business decisions, it can be very powerful, and I think now cost-effective way of creating content on the web. And if you tie that back into the previous concept, you can make really good content with infographics that are also built on survey data. Instead of just something boring that's not actually adding value, you can say, here's statistics based on our survey, way easier to digest than those boring graphs or a 300-word press release that's all text. So that's a nice way of tying those two back in and getting more value out of your content in that way. Another thing that I think you can get a lot of links and traction out of are building your own studies. And it's not any exact science, just a casual study. You essentially can find publicly available, reputable data sets, Yelp, census data, there's FBI data, anything that you could essentially gather data from and then create your own ranking. So in this example, which city has the biggest sweet tooth? Basically look for number of bakeries, things like that. It's like not anything fancy, and then you create a ranking, and the #1 city will share it because they're happy that they were mentioned in that ranking, and it's very easy to get distribution. News outlets will cover it in that #1 site, and potentially, depending on how the content resonates, you can go all the way through the top 10 if you create a top 10 ranking, and many out of that entire top 10 will cover this in news publications, lower end publications, and things like that. So it's a really cheap and easy way to create something interesting if you just gather data, curate it, and create a ranking out of it that relates back to your business and can tie in and do very well from a content marketing perspective. Another suggestion is native social media images. So something I see very frequently on the lazy side of social media is you simply publish. You take your blog post link and you dump it into Facebook, and you take whatever images used, you dump it into Twitter, you take whatever images used. But a really effective, high distribution social media is going to create native images. And what that means is they're specific to each social network, and therefore they have more spread and reach because of it. So if you look at the Twitter image, it's shorter. Twitter images, that's the exact specifications that you need to be able to fit in the Twitter timeline and be able to see those pants and that bag in full on that timeline. But if you use that same image on Facebook, you'd be doing yourself a disservice because you could potentially have a much taller image. And as we talked about with Pinterest, the taller the image is, the more bandwidth you take in the timeline, therefore the more likely it is to be seen and shared and all those things. So if you think about the native constraints of each network and you create images to that, you'll do much better for yourself in terms of total distribution because you'll maximize the real marketing potential of each area. And when we think about content, we think about infographics, studies, surveys, all those things. What we do, and I recommend that you do too, is always tie the concept back to the success framework. It's from Made to Stick. It's a really good book, easy to read book by the Heath brothers. It's essentially just tells you what ideas stick and which don't. And they really tie back to this framework, this success acronym, and that's that the ideas are simple, unexpected, credible, concrete, emotional, and they tell stories. And the more that we can basically tie in all of our concepts to each of these, we can inevitably look back at how the piece did and know that we hit on every point, and we are asking ourselves, hey, this isn't very simple, it's kind of hard to understand, this data is not unexpected whatsoever. No wonder it didn't do well. And I think you could look at your own content and look at this metric or this framework and the content you wondered, why didn't that do well? And then you tie it up against this, you'll have a better understanding for really what happened and why it performed the way it did. And very important thing that I have to mention that relates to content and just your site in general. If you don't know about this by now, Google is releasing a mobile update on April 21st that is going to hit sites that are not mobile optimized. So when you're building content and when you're thinking about your own site, it better be mobile friendly. There's mobile friendly tools out there and all those things, but you better be ready for that coming April 21st because that could really hit your responsive and your mobile traffic, which could make a big difference for your business. So you've created the content, it's great. Now how do you get it out there? It's not as simple, again, as publishing on Facebook, getting no engagement, and thinking that somehow did something for your business. You have to think in advance. You have to have metrics that tie in and that you're holding yourself to and trying to improve on every time out versus just hitting publish and being okay with that end game. Because if you do that continuously, that's not a content marketing strategy. That's just publishing content. So for us, what we try and do is we try and hit a standard of 100 Twitter shares per post. If we get that metric, we know that it's resonated pretty well. People liked it, and that will inform our macro goals of more leads, organic traffic, and all of those things. So we start at that micro goal as understanding this is what really success looks like on an early analysis level, and that will help inform understanding how that content did and how we can improve upon future content and things like that. So if it's not Facebook, it's not Twitter, it's not your own social networks, just hitting publish, how do you really get visibility on this content? You got to spend a lot of time doing distribution as well. I think that's part that many people don't understand. It's not as simple as creating. Almost for us, it's like a 60-40 creation time, where creation 60%, promotion is 40% of the time. Sometimes it can swing the other way as well and be even more promotion than creation. Just reality of how laborious distribution is, what it costs, and all of those things. So one good way is Facebook dark posts. What dark posts do, it's an advertising product. It enables you to target a very specific segment and advertise to them directly. So we think about the Sherry's Berries, what city has the biggest sweet tooth? If we have Miami as the #1 city, we can use a dark post to target people in Miami specifically that might be interested in the fact that they were just named #1 on this study. And we have found that when you target an area like that with a dark post, you can see massive distribution. You can get cost per click down to as little as a penny. If you do it well, it's probably more realistically going to be 5 cents to 10 cents. But if you dial it in well, it can do very well. And so what I mean by that, and most important thing, takeaway of this, is the concept of a node. So what a node means is that whoever you target that to needs to have a lot of other friends around them that share that exact same interest. So if I'm trying to target people that are only interested in Miva, for example, unfortunately, probably not all my friends are going to be interested in Miva. I might be able to do a dark post specifically at them, but it's not going to have strong distribution potential because when they share it, none of their friends are going to care. Compare that to a city where you target a city and there's one person in Miami and they share it. There's a good probability that a lot of their friend base is also obviously in Miami or in the surrounding area, therefore would be interested in it. So you have to think about that node concept of how many people around them are potentially like-minded, or this is not going to do as well for you, and you'll wonder why your CPC was 20 to $1 the same way. Stumble upon advertising is another easy way to get page views on your content. It's great for really visual, easy to digest content. All you have to do is go to their advertising product, and what we do is we spend $20, and that will identify whether or not this piece is going to do good on Stumble Upon or not. That we do $10 per day, first day, second day, target the interest it applies to, and if we know it's really visual, easy to digest, we can sometimes get 10,000, 15,000 views. The cost benefit is Stumble Upon by its name is people stumbling through content. It's going to be higher bounce rate. But for the cost, which again can be 3 cents to 8 cents to distribute this content per view, it's pretty affordable, and it can be another way to just add another quiver to your bow in terms of content marketing tactics that you can use. Pinterest promoted pins is a new upcoming thing that, again, could be huge for e-commerce. They're only letting in some people right now, but if you apply now at the ads platform, you should do this now even if you're unsure whether or not you're going to do it, because you don't know when you're going to get in, but it's highly powerful. Right now, a few campaigns that I'm looking at are seeing 15 to 25 cents per click. You have more potential to see actual click-throughs to your site if you have a preview. So for example, this is 5 foods to never eat. You don't know what those are without going to the site. You have to have it's compared to maybe a nice pair of shoes and there's only one pair of shoes that you promote. You might get brand impressions, but you're not getting click-throughs to your site. It needs to be a preview image that incentivizes people to go through to the full site. So with infographics, if you size it correctly, you can sometimes give them only a preview and it'll take it through to your site as well. And sometimes the cost benefit of infographics is it's still worth promoting on Pinterest just because it's going to be so effective net for the cost that you're going to pay to promote it. Email outreach. So this is by far the most time intensive one. It's free. You got to pay someone or do this yourself, but it's highest ROI in terms of generating exactly what you want from a search perspective, because it's never as easy to get in front of the actual people who link to you as through email outreach, because that's the only way you're going to get in front of webmasters, in front of news people that can link to you, through bloggers and all those things at a very consistent 100% clip when you send these emails. So to do email outreach well and do it at scale, again, sometimes we spend 24 hours promoting content, sometimes sending 100 emails, and you want to make sure they're targeted emails, not spamming people. But that's the kind of thought process you should be having. We should be able to send that volume if we're really trying to hit link goals, and we have to know that the actual target market is there for that to make sense for the content we're creating. So I included a link there to some outreach best practices. If you're thinking about doing outreach, it's not, I think a lot of people start it off and do it very wrong. So there's some good tips there about how to, I think, leverage better practices in order to get higher ROI on the actual outreach you're doing. Reddit is a super powerful but very subtle social network. You can't just go there and submit and expect to do well. You have to be wary of the community's thought process, because they will actually, they hate marketers. So you can't just go in there and submit your stuff. You're risking getting your domain banned, your username banned, your content not shown. So reality is you should be a constant user of Reddit before really thinking about submitting, getting to know what they share. If you're a beer company, you would want to go to the beer subreddit, see what they're sharing. Do they share only image links? If they're only sharing image links, you probably shouldn't actually send website links or submit website links, because that will stand out like a red flag. There's other subreddits that only have commentary. You can only write posts. You can't submit URLs. For that reason, it might not make sense for you. But for the right company, and this is the case for a lot of, again, B2C, there's tons of high volume subreddits that you can utilize and get a ton of traffic, thousands to 10,000 visitors on your site. And again, including a link to some suggestions on how to use Reddit better, how to make sure you're not putting yourself at risk, and also how to identify the high traffic subreddits that are more likely to drive value for you and can help inform the kind of content you make as well. Content recommendation services are something that's upcoming. It can be more expensive, but Taboola and Outbrain essentially enable you to just submit your URL, and below each blog post on different news sites, it will recommend your content based on the focus of that piece of content. It's not a link, it's hidden, but it's purely for page view perspective and can generate a lot of traffic. It's a little more expensive. It's going to be in the 25 to 35 cent range, but if you have the budget, potentially it can be worth testing for your business, as it can resonate with some B2C companies and depending on the industry, and do very well. But I think you really need to tie that in when doing paid distribution to the secondary concepts I talk about. If you're only trying to generate links or brand awareness or one single opportunity when doing content marketing, I think you're going to lose money on a lot of these efforts. I think when you're really dialed in, you have the calls to action, you know the links have strong value to you, you know you're going to get email signups, then these can be very powerful and high ROI channels on their own and do very well. But if you're doing them in isolation, I wouldn't recommend doing it, because I know a lot of companies that probably are burning through a lot of money just advertising and hoping it does something without an actual measurement of what it's actually doing for them. So as I mentioned, I mean, this is a process. You're not just going to go out there and hit publish and all of a sudden get tens of thousands of visits on Reddit, tens of thousands of visits on StumbleUpon. You're going to fail up front. You're probably not going to get much traffic up front, but it's an iterative thing. Like your first year, your first 2 years, you might be wondering, why isn't this working? Why aren't we seeing great growth in organic traffic? Why isn't this content really resonating? But you'll start seeing that maybe your followers are growing a little bit. Maybe you're getting a few more signups, and maybe next year you get a little bit more lift. And suddenly things are starting to stick a little bit more. You're getting more distribution. Suddenly links are happening pretty commonly. And your Facebook page is getting pretty impressive compared to your competitors. And then maybe it's not 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the line, suddenly you have an entrenched position and you've seen great growth from this kind of process, like a company like REI has done through this constant, frequent content marketing, top of the funnel content creation, and all those things. So if you tie it all together and do it consistently and iterate on it and dial it in, measure your metrics, and are really thinking about this process and spending a ton of time on promotion, I think you can get tons of value out of content marketing that you wouldn't have otherwise if you had just hit publish and done nothing. So that's all for me, and got any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Excellent. We definitely have time for a few questions. And can I have another mic on this side, please? Wow, you must be good. Answered everything.
Or really bad.
Yes. We will have a link to the slides, right, Rick? Yes, we will have a link to the slides.
It's Ross It's bit.ly/Ross, R-O-S-S, dash MivaCon.
Cool. So they're there. I think we distribute them as well with the bunch. Any questions? Here, we got one. Oh.
Yeah, it's on Twitter too. I shared it right at 9 a.m. I'll share it again right after this, but it's bit.ly/Ross, R-O-S-S, dash MivaCon. Yep.
Over there.
Will you be available after this to talk to people about individual signups for your company?
Sure.
Where?
Where?
So coffee break at the front over here, around this area. Anyone else? Here we go.
Can you give me an idea of how you know when you are over, communicating to a, your specific group of customer base? We've got people in our company that would love to send an email blast and then send it again, half a week later, and send it something else that references the same kind of material again. They don't have much concern over communicating, so how do you know when you've maybe reached a saturation point and you're going to start having people opt out?
Yeah. So I would just look at your email marketing tool, and you should be able to see click-through rate. So if click-through rate on your emails are dropping, that means people are starting to tune it out, and therefore probably aren't engaging with it. Also, you can look at unsubscribe numbers. If suddenly that second email about the same topic, you generated 2x the normal volume of unsubscribes, that's probably a strong signal that that's what caused it.
One more over here, maybe two.
How does these types of strategies differ for a business-to-business, company, as opposed to consumer?
It's really, besides the metrics at the front, which are slightly different, it's really the same concept. Like in B2B, I think you would push email signups even stronger. You might put things behind an ebook, do more white papers, those kinds of things. Facebook's probably not going to be a prominent network for you. You might want to consider LinkedIn. There are a few more distribution channels like LinkedIn. There's more. Twitter is a paid distribution channel, but they're high CPC. So normally you need that strong tie-in, like an email sign up, or be very good with retargeting or something like that to really drive return.
One more over there. This was the same question, coincidentally. No. One more. Going. Oh, where?
How would you recommend a company that does not have a client base? And there's so many tools out there that you can buy client lists and things like that. How would you reach out?
So you're a service company?
Yes. Well, we do display point of purchase fixturing, so it can be B2B, but it can also be for people catering for bar mitzvahs, and so it could be a client base as well.
Okay, and you're asking how specifically would you get in front of? You said fixtures or what?
Yeah, they're like acrylic fixtures. So you put your a jewelry store could put all their pieces on it, or a mom I'm doing a bar mitzvah for somebody, and they're.
Right. That seems like a very search-driven thing, where reality is a lot of your conversions seem like they would come through search. Secondarily, doing good content marketing, you could get into your email marketing funnel. I think that would be a powerful way. But realistically, some businesses are just not going to attract a lot of likes on Facebook or follows on Pinterest. It's just not the right tie-in. Right. So you got to find what makes specific sense for you. For you, it's probably email marketing and just making sure you have the search side really dialed in. I think just off high level 5-second thought on what you're seeing.
We have a question from the floor, literally.
Hey, so I have a question. My website was ranked on the first page. I'm a photographer. It was ranked on the first page for about 3 years, probably in the second and third position. It would bounce back and forth, but I had to change my name recently. And by doing that, it made my search rank go way back.
So you changed your domain name?
Had to change the domain name.
Okay. Did you do a 301 from the old domain to the new domain?
I don't even know what that is.
So that's probably what you should have done.
Okay.
So if you did the old website still exist, or you just took it down?
No, so so the current website is, with the new name has the old name forwarded to that, so people can still get to it, but that's not the actual name of the website. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it does forward. I mean, this might be, I'm happy to, I probably would be better if you just email it to me. I'm happy to answer.
Okay, that'd be great. And then the other thing was conversion. So I get about 30,000 page views a month on average, and I get over 100,000, click-throughs through photos and stuff like that per month. But I'm not seeing a good conversion.
And this kind of goes back to that CPC concept I was talking about earlier. It's important to tie it into actual keywords that have monetary worth. So I imagine what's happening for you is maybe you have great photos and people just want to see those photos or are looking for specific types of photos, but they have no intent to ever hire a photographer. So what you really want to dial in is specifically the terms where they have intent to hire a photographer. And there is a possibility that you could get leads through that. So that's not necessarily bad, but it's just, there's some industries where you're just going to get 1 million page views and the conversions are going to be a lot smaller. So.
Thank you so much, Russ. That was great. Very informative.
Thank you.
So, the third of our presidential speakers, Amazon is one of our presidential sponsors, and I'm going to welcome Jeff Rayfuse onto the stage to give us an update. Thank you, Jeff. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Keith. Everyone having a good day? Excited to be here? Awesome. I'll tell you, just nervously standing over in the corner and following someone like Ross, I was really excited, having been a long lifetime sufferer of stage fright, when someone asked, "Can you repeat that?" Thank you for that question. There should be a little clicker for the slides, I believe. Not only did he not repeat it, but then he stole the clicker. Quickly becoming the most awkward minute of my life. Thanks, Rick. I can always count on you. Excellent. Thank you. All right. At Amazon, we talk to a lot of merchants. So when putting together a presentation for you, we thought you'd like to hear some of the challenges that are on their minds. One of the things they tell us is that it's difficult to attract quality shoppers to their website. The level of competition and fragmentation and noise is higher than it's ever been before. They tell us that meeting customer expectations is difficult. They're higher and they're rising. It's customers want things better. They want it faster, more, easier. And guess what? They want it all for less. Getting shoppers to register and let alone purchase is difficult. And it's even more difficult in mobile, where space is limited, formats are varied, and data entry can be a real pain. They tell us they're frustrated by the escalating requirements for compliance and security. And it's taking a lot of time. It's taking time away from revenue-driving initiatives. Do these things sound familiar? Because we've heard from some of you in the room about having the same problems. So what I wanted to introduce is a concept that we call the conversion quotient. It starts with investment. You see, there's a certain level of energy that's required for a shopper to become involved with your company and purchase your products. Let's think of that investment in terms of time, hassle, and risk. In order for a conversion to occur, that investment has to be proportionate to the mind share that that shopper is willing to assign to that purchase decision. Let's think of mind share in terms of value, utility, and visibility. If these two things are off balance, if the investment exceeds the mind share, then you're not going to make the sale. It's simple, right? If you had to go through a lengthy credit application for something simple like a pack of gum, you just wouldn't do it. What the problem is, though, is that merchants, we often, in fact, almost always, overestimate the amount of mind share that a shopper is willing to give us. So let's take a minute and look at some questions that are going to help us get real about mind share. It's very difficult for any merchant to maintain and to establish and maintain significant mind share. There are some exceptions, brands like Starbucks and Apple and Nike, they've all done a great job at this. But for most of us, we've got a lot of work to do, and we have to look at seriously what we can do to improve our conversion quotient. You see, with so few shoppers actually becoming registrations or subscribers, and even fewer becoming purchasers, you've got to maximize every single one. So if you're thinking that you might have a conversion problem, you're not alone. There's a lot of data out there that supports that this is a problem across all verticals and across merchants of all sizes. FireClick did a survey on this. The reported shopping cart abandonment rate was over 67%. So that's 2 out of 3 online shoppers that are on your site, put something in the basket, and then they leave without ever paying for it. The good news is there are some things you can do. Ross was just talking about one of them. One of the first levers that you can pull is to attempt to buy or earn additional mind share. You do this through increasing your spend and your time and your efforts in your marketing, right? How many of you, raise a hand if you actively have a marketing campaign or have done one in the last 12 months? A lot of hands going up. Very simple. So these campaigns are great at increasing traffic, but what they don't do is anything to improve your conversion rate. In fact, it'll probably drive it down because it's important to remember that these new shoppers are no more likely to convert than your existing shoppers. In fact, they're probably less likely. What we at Amazon recommend is that you pull the second lever first, and you look for ways to reduce the time, the hassle, and the risk with completing a transaction on your site. And when you invest in this, you'll actually improve your conversion quotient. And guess what? Once you've done that, when you go back to lever number 1 and you do increase your marketing, you'll actually receive better results from all of those campaigns. Makes sense. Got a little bit of wonkiness on our slide here. Let's see. Oh. So if you figured it out by now, what we're really talking about is improving the customer experience. One of the things that we've learned at Amazon is that that's probably the most reliable way that you have to increase registrations, conversions, boost sales, and improve customer loyalty. And when we look at ways to improve the customer experience, we see it from 3 different angles. Number 1 is make it fast. Save your customers time wherever you can. Make it easy for them to get what they want from your site and to get out with as few taps or clicks as possible. And number 2, you make it easy. Make your site intuitive and responsive. Make it available for them to find what they're looking for and then purchase it without any hassles. And number 3, you make it safe. Protect your customers by staying behind your products and services and giving them a safe and secure environment to conduct commerce. At Amazon, we've developed a product that we believe delivers to these 3 needs. Login and Pay with Amazon allows millions of Amazon account holders to easily complete checkout using the account information that's stored in their site. We don't receive any information regarding the items, and it's a fully branded and intuitive experience that Miva's developed. It's already built into Miva 9 and Miva 5.5 if you haven't yet upgraded. I'll let Rick tell you why you should do that. But rather than having me tell you more about it, we've got a short video that one of our merchants has put together and we'd like you to see. Thank you.
Like Amazon, we're obsessed with customer. When we were looking at the sort of questions we'd usually ask on a Monday at trade, such as how much traffic did we get last
Again from the top.
Like Amazon, we're obsessed with customer. When we were looking at the sort of questions we'd usually ask on a Monday at trade, such as how much traffic did we get last week, we realized the customer just didn't care. What they do care about is trust and speed and convenience. I think as a customer, one of the most frustrating things about shopping online is the bit after the magic's happened. You know, you've been taken into this wonderful world, you've found a product that you love, you've added it to your basket, and then you're confronted with this roadblock of passwords and credit cards and addresses, and it makes you sometimes just want to give up. Everyone trusts Amazon. You know, everyone shops with Amazon the whole time. They tackled the fact that we don't have to go and remember our credit card or which address that we want to send it to, or the postcode of our mother that we want to send a gift to. So I don't have to find my wallet or my credit card or anything. I can just click and check out.
In the 7 weeks since launch of Amazon Login and Pay, we've seen a 34% increase in checkout conversion. One of the other key benefits from using Amazon Login and Pay throughout the All Saints checkout journey is that we've taken the overall time it takes a user to get through the checkout from, you know, a minute and a half down to just under 30 seconds, which is absolutely huge. And, you know, in the kind of never-ending quest for a seamless experience for customer and minimal amount of clicks.
So like Amazon, we're also 20 years this year, and we've spent the last 20 years trying to make best, most exciting fashion that we can, as well as trying to give our customers a great experience. Amazon have spent the last 20 years just trying to make people's lives easier when they shop. And so I think the best thing about Login and Pay with Amazon is when you combine those 2 sets of experiences, then everyone wins. We win, the customer wins, and Amazon wins. We don't do partnerships at All Saints. You know, we build our own stores, we weld our own furniture, we have a design team of 34 people who create all of our collections. You know, we code our own website. But we did this because it just works.
Thank you. So I know I'm holding up a coffee break. The last thing that I'll say is if you haven't yet stopped by to talk with us, please do so. We love to hear from merchants. We love to hear about your stories and what matters to you. We're right over there in the corner, and we're standing behind the product today by offering free processing for up to 90 days or $5,000 for signing up. So it's already built in. Give it a shot and come by and meet us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jeff. And you got free stuff too, right? Free stuff too. Okay, let's grab a coffee. I'll see you back here in 15 minutes, 10:15. Thank you.
So if you do me a favor and stop talking in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That was pretty cool. I got jealous of Keith's stage time this morning. He couldn't keep me down. I had to get up here. Now, the reason I'm up here is our next speaker is someone I wanted to personally introduce. He is, he's from PayPal. He's not here to do a sales pitch. He's here to talk about the amazing transformation of the payment industry in the last few years. Also, he's a former military guy, and having to follow Amazon, I was a little worried. I thought maybe like an MMA cage match was going to break out. So I asked him, "Hey, Steve, were you special forces or anything?" And he looks at me and goes, "Well, I was a Marine." And then that's it. I was like, oh. All right, well, hey, thanks, Steve. You're a real intense kind of guy. Before I actually bring him up on stage, though, the one thing I do want to think is, how many of you enjoyed the Blades dinner last night? Was that an exciting event? We gush over our sponsors here, but in this case, I want to point out one very specific sponsor. The Blades dinner would not exist if it was not for PayPal. PayPal steps up year after year. They pay for that dinner, and so we want to take time to personally thank you guys for that. If you thought John Lawson was high energy yesterday, hold on to your seats. Get ready for Mr. Steve Fusco. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, man. All right. To a bunch of business leaders, and she said, "Well, to be perfectly honest, you're not in my wildest dreams." So, it is a softball. It is a softball, folks. All right. Look, this is, it's really I've spoken to a bunch of folks here. There's an amazing group here. Everyone here moves markets. Everyone here is the engine of the economy. Everyone here cares so deeply about their customers. And so that's why this topic is so unbelievably important. And it starts with a promise. It's the promise of what the internet is and could be, the thing that we've all dreamed about and known about for so many years that is finally here. I remember back in the day, CompuServe, where you had your 56K modem and you dialed up and you hear all those funny noises, and then the thing pops open and there it was, right? You had your first email or your first this or your first that. And everybody dreamed then about connections. And they dreamed about, well, what if, what could be? And I guess that's really my point. And I want to illustrate it with an experience, because what's happened is, there we go. What's happened is these things that are made possible by technology, these things that are made possible by what Miva has built, by the APIs that communicate back and forth between this platform and that platform, they've been so seamlessly embedded into these experiences that we forget they're there. We've become entitled to them. We've come to rely on things that we don't even know we're relying on. And this is a great example. I remember back in 1988, I went to my first concert. My dad took me to see Van Halen, OU812 tour. It's a terrible album. If I was a couple years earlier, I would have gone to see 1984, and that kicked ass. But I remember it was Carrier Dome, Syracuse, New York. And it was a freaking nightmare. You had to order the tickets, you go to will call, you stand in this line. You imagine my dad, I was 12 years old, he had me and my brother with him, this guy Mike Bowarski, who I haven't talked to since the concert. You go through this horrible experience because there's all these things in the way of actually experiencing what you want to experience, right? All we wanted to do was sit there and listen to Eddie Van Halen rip those guitar solos. But Just getting there, getting the tickets, buying the t-shirt, and everything about it was a pain in the ass. Now, you pull out your mobile phone, you buy your ticket. It's virtually rendered. It serves up a QR code, and there's a device that mechanically reads it when you get there that registers your attendance. A cross-channel. There's a lot of technology that makes that happen, right? And by the way, it pops right into your Outlook calendar. Like, you don't even know it's there, but it comes to the day and you get a reminder that says, hey, by the way, you got to go to the Carrier Dome. And you click on it and the directions are there. Have you ever, this happens to me sometimes. I have a tendency to get frustrated when I don't have exactly what I want in exactly the moment that I want it. But how annoying is it when you click on that thing and the map doesn't serve it up? Does that ever happen to you? Like, for whatever reason, you don't have a signal, or maybe the Wi-Fi's down, you're like, why isn't my map working? Right? Because you just expect it. You know? Open table. You know, you want to go to a restaurant. One click, you know all the restaurants. You know how far they are from where you're going to be. You know if people like you like them. You got the menu. It's right there. And by the way, parking. If you've ever been to the Carrier Dome, parking is a nightmare. Well, you know what? They've got apps now right on your phone, right alongside that same experience. T-shirt. If they had CDs, you'd order the CD, but now you get the, the MP3. Point is that this is all made possible by technology, and it's so seamlessly woven together into an experience that it lets you experience the experience. The partnerships that StubHub in this case has with all those other technologies is what makes it possible and personally rendered for you. And this is what your customers not only are looking for, it's what they expect. You know, we have this statistic, 220 million people by 2018 will have a smartphone. And, you know, I could sit here and ask you to raise your hand if you have a smartphone, but I won't, because it's obvious that you're all teenagers. I'm just kidding. But look, everybody has a smartphone. And what is the practical implication of that? The practical implication of that is that every single one of you is an active node in a complex network that literally spans the globe. It's a power grid. It's the access point, that mobile device that every one of you has. In fact, you probably have a mobile device. How many here have a smartphone and a tablet with them right now? I mean, 50% of the people, okay? That is your entry point to an active and vibrant global network. And if you're not participating in it, you're absent from it. And so the message here is, how do you light the fuse? What is the connection point that begins it all? And it probably will come as no surprise to you that my answer to that question is a definitive PayPal. But I say that because I mean it. If you've ever had this experience, I buy all my personal travel tickets on Expedia.com. I've been using Expedia for years. I love it. I'm a net promoter of Expedia. I can't explain why, I just love Expedia. And I always have this situation where I'm about to buy the ticket. And at some point, my wife and I have probably argued because I like to leave at 6 o'clock in the morning so that I'm guaranteed to go wherever I'm going. She wants to hang out, linger for a little bit, and leave around noon. And so there's always a situation on the day of travel that I get in trouble because she forgot that we agreed to buy the ticket at 6 o'clock in the morning. But you have that thing where you got your finger over the button and you say, I'm going to buy this. All right? And you click it. And that's really the message. Payment signals intent. Everything follows after the payment. In Expedia, what happens after you click the payment? That's when you get the hotel offer. That's when you get the package deal offer, rental car, theme parks. It all serves up after the payment because they know everything before that was shopping. Everything after that has to do with the experience itself. And so the message that you want to take from this is that if you don't have the right payments experience, if you don't, I forgot, somebody earlier had made this point about this, it was the customer video we just saw. Customer video we just saw where the guy was saying, you get through this experience of shopping, you want something, you look for it, you go through all the research personally to find exactly what you want. And if that experience when you pay for it sucks, you know what? You might push through, but that's all you're going to do. And so what I want to talk to you about today are what we're calling best practices. These are just things that are enabled by payments, by, frankly, the PayPal connection that you have through Miva for you to help grow your business and connect with your customers. The first is more customers, more sales. Pretty obvious, right? And I'll talk to you a little bit about what this means in a minute. Second is catch the mobile tsunami, because there's no better way to illustrate a point about growing your business than with a metaphor that evokes destruction. That joke fell a little flat, but what are you going to do? All right, come on, work with me here. I know it's right before lunch. Third is omni-channel. You think about that experience we talked about with buying the ticket, and it's pretty incredible, right? I'll give you some examples when we get to the slide here, but this whole thing about omni-channel and convergence of technology, people have been talking about it for years. I worked at Citigroup years ago, and we had a whole mobile department, and everybody was asking this question around convergence. And the question then was, it was futurists. It was people who were trying to contemplate what the technology would look like as it was developed, what the hardware would look like, what would be the diffusion of that hardware into purchasing power populations. And the reality of it is, all that's happened. It's all happened. It's that global network that I just talked about. And so there's so much opportunity that comes out of that. Trust. This is the thing that everyone forgets about until they are confronted with it. Somebody told me trust takes a lifetime to build and a moment to destroy. And there's no place where that is more evident or more real or more true than in a business and in the relationship that you have with your customers. Because if they're burned once, they will never come back. And the last one is building a global business. It's unbelievable to me how, when I look at our own business, and as I've gone and visited other regions and talked to leaders from the other markets, there's this sizzling demand that exists in these corridors of people wanting to transact and do business across borders. And there's so many businesses out there who could serve those customers who just don't. So let's talk about this. First one, more customers, more sales. There are 168 million people with active PayPal accounts. And there are additional 5 million every quarter that we layer on who set up PayPal accounts and start transacting. Now, I tell you all that. There's other mobile wallets, obviously. PayPal clearly is the biggest and the oldest. Point being is that these are folks who sign up for a reason and are actively using that account for a reason. And so, absent that little yellow button, there's an obvious connection point that just doesn't exist. And so we see with the businesses that we work with, you pop up that yellow button and the conversion of PayPal customers, those 168 million that are shopping online and they set up that account literally to shop online, conversion of those customers increases by 30%. So if there's nothing else that you take away from this, go talk to Joe and Chris right over there. I'm not selling, I'm just informing. Joe and Chris would be absolutely delighted to share with you how the seamless technology that you have with Miva allows you to flip a switch and have that button open for the 168 million customers of PayPal that are looking for it right now. It's a big opportunity. But the second thing, and this relates to the gentleman earlier was talking about conversion. Here's the thing. There is $4 trillion in uncaptured, whatever the word is, volume for abandoned carts every year. $4 trillion. That's people who go through the process. They came, they looked, they saw, they found what they were looking for, and for whatever reason, they abandoned the cart. And the Google did a study, I think 2 or 3 years ago. And what they did is they did a time motion study where they tracked the number of keystrokes in an average checkout process. Can anyone guess what the average number of keystrokes is? And I spoke to a gentleman earlier and I told him the answer, so don't yell it out. But guess. Anybody? What? Whoa, no, I mean like a person, that's a lot of keystrokes. That might be someone with a name from Eastern Europe or something. That's a little less than that, but what was it? Wow! 122 is the answer. I don't have any prizes, sorry. But 122 keystrokes, can you believe that? And here's the thing. When I'm on a computer, a desktop computer, that's no problem for me. I mean, I just burn right through 122 keystrokes, right? But try doing that on a mobile phone. I mean, it's impossible. And so I'm blurring the lines here and getting into the next one. The point is that with these checkout options, obviously we have PayPal up here, but with these checkout options, what it does is it makes that process much easier because all the account setup has happened already. And so the customer can burn through it, and on a mobile device, they can put in a 7-digit mobile number, a 4-digit PIN, tap, tap, done. And it's so easy, it's so much faster that a lot of customers, they're angry when it's not there. Flip to mobile here. Catch the mobile tsunami. It's astonishing to me how quickly this is growing. It's a direct correlation to the previous point. We see there's an Ipsos study that said that mobile commerce is growing at 3 times the rate of e-commerce. PayPal now sees 20% of its volume on mobile. We did, what was it, $10 billion in mobile volume last year. On eBay, 2 or 3 times a month, somebody buys a Ferrari on a mobile phone. I mean, when I asked the team when they told me that, I was like, is there any way to track how often that happens in Las Vegas? Because there's got to be more to that story. But it's true. That means somebody picked up a mobile phone and pushed buy for a Ferrari. And so, look, here's the thing. We said 220 million in America, a billion worldwide. People are using their mobile devices to shop and buy and pay. And if you're not there, you're not there. You're just simply not present for it. One of the, if you think about this, it's one of these things where the technology sits there. The experience is so beautiful. It's so seamlessly woven into what you're doing that you don't realize when you're adopting it. And, a lot of people have talked in the recent years about couch commerce, where you sit on the couch, you got your tablet with you, you're interacting with the television, you got your tablet right here, maybe you did something on the computer. We tracked at eBay, 46% of eBay purchases, the life cycle of the transaction moved through multiple devices. And what that means is this is a person who might, just as an example, they might do their research on their desktop. They have a nice big screen. They search. They go to different listings, and then they make the final purchase decision when they're standing in the line at Starbucks because there's a continuity of experience between the desktop and the tablet and the mobile. And so when they're standing there in Starbucks, they push the button, and it's done. Now think about it from the context of the absence of that mobile device. Or in a situation where there's pinching and zooming, where you take that desktop experience, which is valuable, which is incredibly, it's critical to the purchase experience, but then impose it upon a device with less real estate. And it just doesn't happen. Just doesn't happen. The example I always think about with this is E-Trade. I have an E-Trade account. I like E-Trade. I think it's a really cool user interface. You can they have lots of different analysis that you can do. You can pull different reports. It's a great site. But when you go to the site, they want you to download. I hope there's no one from E-Trade here that I'd be insulting. The message is, I love E-Trade. But if you go to the E-Trade mobile site, they want you to download their application. Now, in this case, there's absolutely a need for a mobile app, and it has a great user experience. But the point is, they don't have a mobilely optimized experience on the mobile device, and so it ends up serving the desktop experience. And so when you're trying to check in on your portfolio, you're pinching and zooming, and it's just not the experience you're looking for. So catch the mobile tsunami. It's so critical to businesses today, and Miva has a great platform for enabling these types of experiences. Omni. We call it omni-channel. This is where I was talking about convergence earlier, and at PayPal we spend a lot of time thinking about omni-channel. And the truth is that this one, if mobile were well advanced into the life cycle of this emerging customer behavior and revolution, I would say we're earlier in that stage with respect to Omni. And part of that has to do with legacy technology in a point of sale environment still catching up to the trends here. But there's no doubt that this is the direction it's going. And what's important is that we found that people that shop and pay in multiple channels in an omni-channel capacity, they spend more money. They spend 20% more. And it's really nothing more than engaging people in multiple dimensions. Zappos was revolutionary in taking the experience that people had shopping for shoes. Obviously, there's certain gender stereotypes associated with the desire to shop for shoes. But the point is that Zappos looked at this challenge of people wanting to look at the shoes, try them on, and experience them. And they took that into an online business, and they've been fabulously successful. Very few have been able to mirror the success that Zappos has had. But the point of that example is that they recognized the reality of the fact that there was an absolute desire to have the convenience and the versatility and accessibility of an online commerce environment, but there was a gating factor in terms of there's also a desire for touch, feel, kicking the tires in an offline commerce environment. And so, I know that Miva technology enables sort of a continuity of experience between e-commerce and offline commerce. This is the future. I truly believe that, and I think it's still emerging. I think that there's still a lot to be done in terms of how people interact across multiple channels. And so this is something that I think every business owner needs to look at and watch closely and understand as it relates to their customers' preferences over the next 6 to 12 months. Trust. This one to me, every time I see these stories pop on the front page of the Wall Street Journal about data breaches, I cringe a little bit because I know these people. Our head of risk is a guy named Tomer Barrel at PayPal, and he's an amazing guy. He ran a company called Fraud Sciences in Israel, and that company was acquired by PayPal. And his team does a lot of very cutting edge work in terms of our fraud department. But he came to our customer summit last year, and he was talking about data breaches. And the point that he made, it was just chilling to me when he said it. And this is a guy that's been around, seen things, knows what he's talking about. And he said, there's two kinds of companies out there. There's companies that have been breached, and there's companies who don't know that they've been breached. And I mean, it's just shocking when you think about it. Then point being is that That fear that I'm feeling, you're probably feeling, and I can guarantee your customers are feeling it. And so what can you do to enable an environment of trust online? You know, this obviously is probably the core strength of PayPal. I mean, convenience obviously is important, but one of the things that when I talk about those 168 million customers out there that are looking for the button, this in a large percentage of the cases, this is really the reason why, because they know that all that customer information is held somewhere else. It's untouchable. It's very secure, and as a business owner, it's something that you don't have to worry about. And so I put this up here because you're only going to see more of this stuff. You're only going to see more of these high-profile cases where customer information is stolen. You know, I mean, I remember watching Target, huge Target fan, and I mean, the stock just plummeted after the breach was announced. And so every time that happens, it translates into an expectation. And so relieving the concern for your customer ultimately it translates into engagement, it translates into conversion, it translates into sales. Last is global. This is some quick stats here. $105 billion in trade between these corridors in an online environment this year. And in 3 years, we expect that to be $300 billion. $300 billion. You know, I mean, that's just astonishing. It's the size of a small country. And so this is why you hear a lot of folks talk about cross-border trade. You know, there's certain corridors, you know, we highlighted a lot of east-west corridors. There's also a lot of trade that happens with the Latin American countries, you know, into the United States. But what you see here, the phenomenon is that, you know, there's, especially for branded goods, there are certain goods that people in other regions they want to purchase, especially when you have situations when the dollar's weak, which is not the situation we're in today. And so they look to North American companies online to make those purchases. And the challenge is dealing with accepting payments. More often than not, that's the obstacle. And so one of the great things about these digital wallet products is, again, your interaction as a business is with the wallet. The wallet's going to care for all the financial connections globally. They're going to do the vetting of the customer. They're the ones who are going to establish, you know, essentially the mechanism so that that customer can just pay you. Now, here's just another example. Didn't really build the right way, so let's just 9 billion. Okay, so you're supposed to see another little bubble over the other side that says 2 billion. And the point is that the biggest shopping day of the year online for us is Cyber Monday. Cyber Monday in 2014 was $2 billion. November 11th, Singles Day in China was $9 billion. And so just the scale of these markets is incomprehensibly large. And to the extent that we can enable those transactions cross-border, it's just, you know, it's a whole market of opportunity for you that's waiting to be tapped. You know, here's some quick stats on why PayPal is a great partner for this kind of thing. 162 million customers, as I said. We're in 200 markets. You know, wait a minute. Ignore David Lee Roth for a second here. Give me back. Give me back. Give me back. There we go. Oh. Here's the thing. PayPal has spent the past 15 years building this. It's a network of connections to 20,000 financial institutions globally in 200 markets. We accept hundreds of currencies. And as I said earlier, multiple times, we've got 162 million customers. We take the difficulty out of it for you. Okay? This is who we are. This is what we do. And we did it to the tune of $64 billion in transaction processing volume in the fourth quarter of last year, 11.5 million payments a day. So if you believe that story about globality, and if you believe that story about mobile access, and if you believe that story about trust, there's 15 years of history that says we can help you get there. So the takeaway for you, it's global, it's mobile, it's omni-channel, and it ties back to payments. All of these technologies, all of these capabilities, the partnerships that bring those experiences to life in such a meaningful way, that allow you to envelop your customers with a type of experience that they don't even know that they expect, but that they are horribly disappointed by when it is not there. All of this is made possible by the beautiful technology you have with Miva and by the partnership that Miva has with PayPal. You can talk to Joe and Chris over there. But I want to give you a quick video to let a customer tell you the same thing. Thank you, folks.
My name is Stefan Arstall. I'm an entrepreneur, live here in San Diego, and we started a beach lifestyle brand called Tower Paddleboards. Stand-up paddleboarding was like an ancient, Hawaiian sport. It sort of, fell by the wayside, and then it started to explode here maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. 99% of our business is online. We do very little out of our shop, and PayPal's, a much bigger thing online for people. You just turn PayPal on, you're going to get a certain amount more business. It's going to increase your business. To some people, just trust it a lot more. There's a lot of sort of trust issues with credit cards. They don't want their credit card number getting out there. Just flipping that on, I knew from my previous experience. So it was a no-brainer. If you're going to have an e-commerce site, you need to have PayPal. When we went international, PayPal was a huge thing because the access to credit cards, and, in even Europe, even the developed countries, is so much, it's not as prevalent. People just don't have credit cards. And we were doing maybe 30% of our business internationally. PayPal is a huge thing, for any international order. PayPal is essential to any e-commerce business. I think it's one of those foundational blocks. And it's one of those things that it's plug and play. You don't even need a merchant account. You can just plug in a payment solution like PayPal. 15 to 30% of our sales maybe go through PayPal. There's 150 brands in the paddleboard industry. And if we don't offer PayPal, they're just going to jump to the next one.
So I think we're going to take a few questions. Now, there's a lot of jokes out there about a sales guy walking into a technology conference, so go easy on me, all right? No questions? Got to be questions. Anything. Give me about payments. Give me about.
There's a mic coming there.
I just was wanting to ask about how do you see the trajectory of the company going forward and what you guys might be doing to innovate without the, how do you say, partnership with eBay?
Well, first of all, we will continue to have a very strong partnership with eBay. That I think is very important. They are our largest customer, and they're it's an amazing company, and I'm actually very bullish on the future for eBay as well. But I'm incredibly excited about PayPal. So the short answer to your question is, how do I see the trajectory? I see the trajectory going up in a big way. If you think about it, if I look back historically to my experience with I mentioned I worked for a big bank before, and there was this movement over the past 10, 15 years where everybody has turned to the mass affluent, right? And the reason is because banks all carried with them this architecture that prevented them from serving up the types of financial capabilities, payments capabilities, what have you, to anybody other than a select group of people because they weren't making money on them. It cost too much. You have thousands of branches. You have, all the overhead associated with it. And what's interesting about PayPal is PayPal's got a two-sided network. We've got direct relationships with 20,000 plus financial institutions. We operate in over 200 countries, 143 currencies. We've got the scale to transact 11.5 million transactions a day with hundreds of transactions a second. And we also have 168 million people who are actively using their PayPal account. And what that does is it creates a situation where there's no other company in the world that is able to enable those interactions with so many people in so many places with so much scale that it opens up a universe of opportunity and, frankly, empowerment to people on a global scale. There's no other company in the world that can do that, and that's a fact. And I think that if you look at that and you add to it the fact that the global payments business industry is trillions of dollars. I mean, there's so much going on. There's a lot of room for people to play. There's no other company in the world, I would say, that has year-over-year growth that's approaching 30%, but is growing on a $4.5 billion base with nothing but oceans of opportunity ahead of it. So huge opportunity, which is the reason why the separation is happening. There's agility, as you know, that comes from being an independent entity and with having the capitalization of a publicly traded company. And what I can tell you without, revealing what's behind the curtain is there is more activity at PayPal than there's been in years. So stand by.
We got one more over here. Hi. Quite often, people obviously are very guarded about their credit card information. However, they can be a little bit funny about the way they are guarded about it, where they'll call our business up and they'll say, well, I don't trust the internet for credit card transactions. However, they'll ask myself to enter in their credit card number. We're looking at rolling out having PayPal here within the upcoming month. And I'm just wondering how merchants deal with customers calling in wanting to pay by PayPal. I don't know if if their behavior is similar, where they want people, where they want the merchant to try and log in to their account. How do we prevent? I mean, I would think the solution is simply saying, go ahead and order online with your PayPal account.
Right. Yeah.
I don't want to log anybody in.
So I think you are pointing at exactly the reason why people would want to use a PayPal account, right? And you would never log into their PayPal account for them, right?
Right.
And the reason that they have the account is to prevent you from actually being able to do that. Mm-hmm. So I think what you're talking about is it's a pain point, right? And it's a real pain point. It exists, and there's a population of people who aren't going to trust buying stuff out. My dad's one of these guys, small town guy, and I didn't even know he had a PayPal account until I went to work at PayPal. And he said, "Good," because he's exactly the same way. He refuses to type his credit card into anything. These are the types of guys. My dad's one of these guys who, he goes to Supercuts and they ask him, all right, what's your phone number? Because they want to put you into their system. And he tells them, no phone number, John Doe, right? and the point is look, my hope and frankly my expectation is that if and when you put that button up on your site, you're going to find those calls happening with substantially less regularity. That being said, we offer virtual terminal. It sounds like you use, and you're going to continue to have those calls. That's part of the challenge of shopping online. Yeah.
Last question, right in the middle. Thanks for that.
Got a question about PayPal linking with other financial institutions.
Yeah.
Especially Russia. A lot of people don't use Visa as much in Russia as they do their other banks.
Yeah.
Is PayPal really gone after other payment sources? So like, you know, they want to use their Russian bank credit card, or in say Singapore and all these other countries. Are you guys making an initiative to be able to add more and more countries and payment types?
Yeah, so I mean, look, some countries are more challenging than others. We launched Russia, I don't know when it was, last year or the year before, but there's a whole part of the business that manages precisely this set of capabilities, where you know there's an entire organization whose purpose is establishing connections with financial institutions and enabling optionality for our global customer population. You know, Korean market is a super challenging one, right? You know, there's certain technologies that work in an omnichannel way in the U.S. that don't work necessarily in Germany, right? So, but short answer to your question is, our goal is to enable a flexible global network for customers so that anyone, anywhere, at any time can pay with PayPal. And so that's sort of the main endeavor in the back end, and then the front end is creating the technology to make that experience beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Miva.
And you're not cool here until you've tripped over one of these wires.
Yeah, I'm going to be very careful here.
Thanks again. So our final keynote speaker of the event, who was here? Who went to the Blades last night? And who experienced a little bit of Paul Doherty? And who enjoyed it? So you're out there somewhere. I assume you're out there somewhere, and I assume you're mic'd up. There he is. So Russ gave a formal introduction yesterday. I'm going to introduce you as a man who is equal measure of awesome and endearing with a little sprinkling of crazy. How does that sound?
That's good. Okay, thank you. Okay, wait, which forward?
So we got forward.
Next.
We got a laser on there too.
Oh, great. So the Dalai Lama hired me in my department to bring science to the monks in exile in India and all the Tibetans in exile in India. And one of the important things that I had to teach the monks was that science doesn't do everything. And in fact, science defines its own limits. And so he asked me to give this talk, a preliminary version of this talk, to the monks. And in this talk, I'm going to take you to the boundaries of science. And here's a woodcut showing the view of the universe from the Middle Ages. And they thought that there are spheres in the heavens, and one outer sphere of impenetrable dark crystal had holes in it that let the light of heaven shine through the holes. And that was what the stars were. And of course, this woodcut shows what everybody wants to know. Well, if there's a boundary out there to our universe, what's on the other side? And that's what you're going to ask at the end of my lecture. And the whole point of the lecture is we don't know what's on the other side. And I might hint at what's on the other side, and you won't like it. So I'm an experimental scientist. There are many kinds of scientists. And in my science, you can't talk about anything unless you can do an experiment. And this was born at the time of Isaac Newton, when the Royal Society came about. And they had this saying, nullius in verba, don't take anyone's word for it. Do the experiment. You had to be able to do experiments. And to do experiments, you had to be able to see the results, to get the information. Now, there are certain boundaries that information cannot cross. And we're going to meet these boundaries during my talk. Outside the edge of the universe, yes, there is an edge to our universe, the visible universe. Before the beginning of the universe, inside of a black hole, smaller than a quantum limit, faster than the speed of light. We can't go there in modern science. Maybe that'll change, but those are going to be the limits. So in order to do experiments, you've got to see. You've got to see the large with telescopes. You've got to see the small with microscopes, so they're equivalent. And you can use your eyes too. So I need Miva's help. I need Dana, because this slide contains everything in the universe and beyond, and it's hard to fit on one slide. So in fact, I'm going to take you on a tour of this slide, and so we'll come back to it many, many times. So I'm going to start off, as we all would, with me. I'm going to put the me in Miva. And here I am standing on the edge of Half Dome, and I'm a climber, and I go up it the hard way. and then you got to take in the view of Yosemite. And I'm going to measure the universe in terms of me. I'm about a meter from my belly button to my head, a little less, and I'm a little under 100 kilograms. And I'm going to use me as the unit for the universe. And by the way, Half Dome, if I were to step off, it's about 1,000 me's till I stop. And it's the stop that kills me. So here's this wonderful graph, and the horizontal line there is that there's 10 to the 0 there. That's my mass. On the left is the mass of everything in the universe. And on the bottom is its radius, its size. And it turns out, not surprisingly, in our set of units, I am, there's me, human, and they draw the vertical red line down, it comes to 10 to the 0. That's the funny scientist way of writing 1. And that's me, that's my radius. And then on horizontal over there, I've got 10 squared, that's my mass. And we're going to look at all these other things in the universe here on those realms. Now, in fact, all that's in this graph of mass up and down and radius right to left, every one of those tick marks, every time we go 1 tick mark, I add 10 decimal places. So from me to the first tick mark, that's 10 billion. And the span here is astonishing. On the left-hand side, it goes from 10 to the minus 70th. That's a point with 69 zeros and a 1, up to 10 to the 80th. I mean, that's 1 with 80 zeros. The universe is an amazingly big place. Watch Monty Python, you'll get the scale there. And we owe this way of portraying things where the numbers, just 1, 2, 3, they don't matter. It's the number of zeros that matter. This was discovered in a castle in the north of Scotland in about 1600. There's a guy there, and he's known as the Fear of Merchiston. And for those of us in high school and that met logarithms, he was definitely the Fear of Merchiston. And that just meant the ruler of Merchiston. And he was the one that thought about talking about the number of zeros. And because he did that, Laplace, famous philosopher, said essentially, this allowed astronomers to deal with the span of the universe so much more easily that it doubled the amount of work they could do in their lives. And I think that's what computers have done to us. And it turns out after Napier, that was his name, the slide rule was invented. And the slide rule ruled from about 1600 all the way to about 1970 when I went to school. I can actually use a slide rule, but then it was replaced by computers. And it's interesting to think about the power of science. In the 1960s, there were a couple of transistors around. The 1950s, there were a couple around. But today, each of you has 1 billion transistors in your pocket. So the scaling, there we've gone with 9 orders of magnitude. Something that was invented by a couple scientists changed the way science was done and mathematics was done over the last 400 years. And that's what's happening to commerce as well. So as we go here, actually what that last one was Mount Everest looked at from space. And Mount Everest is about 10 half domes. And one of the things I love to do is to go to the high points on Earth, but I don't like to go to crowded places like Mount Everest. Here I am with, this is 2 friends of mine, standing on the summit of Sierra Nevada de Lagunas Bravas, the white mountain of the wild lakes, which no one had ever climbed before. And that's really exciting when you're coming around a corner that no one has seen that corner before. And that's actually the joy of science. All the time, scientists are up against these boundaries I'm going to introduce you to, trying to go past the boundary. And it's really fun to get up there and do that. Okay, so let's take a jump to the Earth. Now, the Earth is 10 to the 7th, 1 with 7 zeros me's in radius. And it's 1 with 24 zeros kilograms. That's a huge jump. And that's the jump to our planet, the Earth. And just to give you a scale here, compared to the mountains, so mountains are like the size of Mount Everest, 1 with 4 zeros high. The Earth is 1 with 7 zeros. That means if you're looking down at the Earth, and Mount Everest, when you're standing at the bottom, it looks so big. When you look at it from space, if you were to shrink the Earth and Mount Everest together down to the size of a billiard ball, the Earth would be smoother. Okay? That is the scale of the Earth. The mountains don't even count that it is so smooth. And that's thanks to gravity. If you were to make Mount Everest twice as high as it is, gravity is so strong, the bottom of the mountain would melt and it would sink into the crust. Mount Everest is about as big as you can get. Jupiter is our biggest planet in our solar system. I'm about to take you on a tour of all the planets in the universe. It's got to be one slide. Oh, well. And it's 11 Earths across, 1,000 Earths in volume, and weighs 300 times as much as the Earth. It's a big one, definitely a big one. And the smallest one, we just visited. We sent the Dawn spacecraft, and we took this really nice picture of Vesta. It's an asteroid between us and between Mars and Jupiter. And from the North Pole to the South Pole, if you drove it, it would get you from San Diego halfway to San Francisco. I mean, this is about as small as you get. And its gravity is still strong enough that it squeezes the mountains down until it's mostly a sphere. That's a property of planets. The gravity is strong and it squeezes them down. But a few years ago, well, in the year 2000, we first saw that there were planets around other stars. That was something when I grew up, went to college, we didn't know if any other star had a planet, completely unknown. Now we have the spacecraft called Kepler, and it has discovered 5,006 possible planets as of this month. And by looking at them with other telescopes, 1,821 of those have been confirmed, orbiting 1,120 stars. And the smallest of these is 2/100th the size of the Earth, and the biggest is 28 times bigger than Jupiter. If you go bigger than 28 Jupiters, it turns into a star. It turns on and becomes a star. So there's a limit to how big a planet can become. If it gets smaller than 0.02 Earths, you get down in the Vesta size, and it begins to become just a rock. We have just recently, in the last few weeks, estimated that almost every star has around it a planet in what's called the habitable zone, a planet that orbits that star at a distance where liquid water is possible. And liquid water is necessary for life as we know it. There may be other lives, but life as we know it. This opens the possibility of us really finding some symptoms of life as we look out as these stars. So in the next couple decades, I'm looking forward to us looking out at an extrasolar planet and finding oxygen in the atmosphere. And oxygen is a real indicator that something interesting is going on that planet. And so this is what to look forward to and what's coming in science. So here we go back to the graph, and we go out from humans at the bottom, up that line to all the planets, and then we see the Earth and the Jupiter, and then we're going to jump to stars. And it's a short jump from the biggest planet to the smallest star on this graph. So here's our local star. It's the sun, one with 60 kilometers, one with 90 ms in radius, two with 30 zeros in mass. Yeah, it's pretty big, but the sun is just a middle of the road star. There are stars 100 times lighter than the sun, and there are stars 100 times heavier than the sun. And here's what happens. Our sun has been around for 4.5 billion years. We use radioactive dating on the rocks around it to date the sun. By the way, when you actually have a scientist around and they say something like, the sun is 4.5 billion years old, you get to ask them, how do you know that? And they have to answer you by giving you an experimental result. And that's how to really use a scientist. And when a scientist hears that, the first thing a scientist thinks is, I doubt that. I bet I can prove you wrong. It's the nature of science. Because if you can prove them wrong, you get a publication. Anyway, so back. The sun is an average star. That's the top line there. It's been going for 4.5 billion years. It's slowly getting warmer. That's not causing global warming. But it's slowly getting warmer at a rate that in 1 billion years, the oceans of the Earth will all boil away. So whatever we do in the next billion years, we've got to solve the getting out of this solar system problem. Maybe move out to Mars or something. I guess Elon Musk's already doing that. Okay, bigger stars, they have much more fuel to burn, but they burn faster. They live bright and they die young. And when they die, they die in a gigantic explosion, a supernova. They give off the energy the sun gives off in a lifetime in a couple of hours. And so our sun swells up into a red giant, which is 1,000 times bigger than the sun. It'll eventually swallow the Earth as it ages. White dwarfs, after the sun turns into a red giant, it collapses under its gravity to the size of the Earth, or a little bit bigger. It's called a white dwarf, and then it just peters out. It cools and dies. But the bigger ones, if it starts out bigger, the gravity is so strong, instead of the white dwarf is still made of, really dense stuff, but gravity can crush the atoms out of existence and squeeze this thing down to something called a neutron star. It's the mass of the sun, or 3 masses of the sun, condensed into the size of San Diego. That's really an impressive thing. And the really interesting thing is what happens next, our first boundary of science. You add a little mass to a neutron star, and gravity becomes so strong that even the nucleus can't resist gravity. Gravity wins, and it squeezes it into something called a black hole. And as we go up this chart up there, we'll see, you get to the sun up near the top, and oh, there's a laser here. Look at that. You get to the sun, and it goes down to a white dwarf. They're all on a horizontal line. They all have about the same mass as the sun. And then you get the neutron star, and then at this line here, this entire line is where anything with this mass right there, that's where it turns into a black hole. That's what this blackness, this is the realm of the black holes. Stars, we know, do it. We've seen black holes. Wait a minute, how do you see a black hole? I'll tell you in a minute. But we've actually seen quite a few black holes up here. And if I could find a way to squeeze myself down to this line, 10 to the minus 27th meters across, I'd become a black hole. Wow, that'd be interesting. Then I'd know it was inside. No, it wouldn't. I'd start sucking you all in and destroying the entire room, but that's, oh well. So we don't want to do that. Okay, so we're back to here. So here's a picture, the Crab Nebula supernova, 1054 AD. Astronomers in China recorded this. Astronomers in Europe missed it. I mean, here's this gigantic brightness in the sky. The church told the astronomers in Europe it wasn't there. They didn't write it down. They'd be excommunicated. So sometimes religion and science aren't very friendly in their interactions. In China, the religion didn't tell them it wasn't there. It was there. They recorded it. It brightened up the night sky. In the middle of that, there is a neutron star. But if it was a little bit bigger, it would have collapsed. Now, I'm only going to show you an artist's representation of a black hole. There it is. It's a black hole. But the gravity of that black hole takes the light from the stars behind it and bends it. Light falls under gravity. And we don't see that much with the gravity of the Earth, but the black hole, the gravity is so intense. The light from behind bends around. And that's what those yellowish arcs are. These yellow arcs, that's some distant galaxy being imaged by the lens of gravity in that black hole. The other thing, by the way, is as you fall into a black hole, it is so small and the gravity is so strong, the pull of the gravity on your feet is 50 tons stronger than the pull of gravity on your head. Nearer a source of gravity is stronger than further. And so you end up being stretched out into a giant piece of spaghetti and sucked into the black hole. And that's called death by spaghettification. It's to be avoided. And there is a way to avoid it. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about black hole math. It turns out the radius of a black hole is proportional to its mass. When you double the mass of a black hole, its radius doubles. You've never seen that happen before. If I use clay, like I have here in these clay balls, and by the way, this is what I do. I try to make science relevant and fun for children. I write children's science books in addition to teaching high school physics teachers. So if you take 2 lumps of clay down here, and you make them the same size, and then you make another lump of clay that is twice, you can see the 2 balls are just as wide as the one big one. That big one will take 8 balls of clay the size of the small ones to make. But that's the way black holes behave. You take 2 black holes of radius 1, you put them together, it makes a black hole of radius 2 and volume 8. That's sort of interesting. The sun or a black hole would be 3 kilometers across, 6 kilometers in diameter, 4 miles across. We have discovered at the center of the Milky Way, this is an infrared picture of the center of the Milky Way. And when the James Webb Telescope launches in a few years, it's going to take amazing infrared pictures of the center of our galaxy. And that the 2 arrows there point to a star, and scientists have seen that star whip around in a really quick ellipse around something that's not there. The something that's not there is a black hole. By the motion of this star, we know that black hole is the mass of 4 million suns. So in the center of our galaxy, the tale told by whipping around stars, we know that there's the mass of 4 million suns. And now we're looking at other galaxies and we're finding these things called supermassive black holes in the middle of every one of them. In fact, we've seen some galaxies that have black holes in the center that are 20 billion suns in size. And the great thing about those is that they're so big, they're 60 billion kilometers in radius, and that means they're as big as our solar system, that you can actually fall through the edge of the black hole without suffering spaghettification. It's actually going to be possible, if you were there, to go inside, and here's the deal. That boundary of the black hole, gravity is so strong that if you took a flashlight and shined it out, even light couldn't escape. Light cannot ever get out of a black hole by shining out the light. Information travels at the speed of light. Information is a thing, and it's how you make your money. Information is a thing, it travels at the speed of light. It can't escape the inside of a black hole. That's why it's a boundary to science. I can go into the black hole. I can't get anything back out to tell you what's in there. So whenever you see the movie Interstellar and they talk about what's inside a black hole, you know that Kip Thorne, brilliant theoretician that he is not an experimentalist because experimentalists can't actually test his ideas about what's inside there. The center of black holes is a great place if you're a science fiction writer, because no one can prove you wrong. But we'd like to find out what's inside there. We'd really, like I said, you really want to know what's inside. There are 3 things we can know about black holes. Because their mass reaches out, the mass has a gravitational effect. We know their mass. They can have electric charge. They don't tend to. And they can spin. And so those are the 3 things we can know, and that's it. So there is this wonderful line here. This is where things turn into black holes. That's the first boundary of science. Now I'm going to take you to this boundary over here. Now a vertical line on a graph of mass versus radius, this is everything at 1 radius. That's the radius of the visible universe. Let me take you step by step to there. So this is the night sky. Go to the deserts of Eastern California. Look up at the night sky. You'll see this band of stars, our Milky Way. But even better, when in some time they have bionic eyes and they give you the eyes of a rattlesnake and you can see the night sky in the infrared, this is an infrared picture of the night sky. And this is something like you take with your phone, the panorama in which you go all the way around the entire horizon and it turns into a flat picture. That's what this is. This is the whole sky viewed in the infrared from the Earth of our galaxy. What does this picture tell you? We're in the boondocks, folks. We are way out on the edge. The center of action is way over there, a couple 100,000 light years away. So just a really neat way to see it. And when in the previous picture, you saw that there was dark bands across the Milky Way. That was dust. And infrared lets us see through the dust. This is really our galaxy. Now, when I'm looking out at that galaxy, looking out in space is looking back in time. There is a time machine and it only goes backwards, and it only goes backwards with distance. When I look out at you, the audience, I see you 10 billionths of a second ago, because that's the speed of light. When I look out, when you look at the moon, you see it as where it was a second and a half ago. That's how long it takes moonlight to get to you. It's not really there. That's where it was. When you look at the sun, you see it where it was 8.5 minutes ago. The sun could explode. You wouldn't know for 8.5 minutes. There's no information travels faster than light. Nothing's going to give you fair warning. The nearest star other than the sun is 4 years out there. The nearest galaxy, big galaxy, is 2.5 million years ago. What's happened in 2.5 million years in that galaxy? And we can actually, as we look out between the galaxies and between the stars, we can look out so far back in time, we can see the birth of the universe. We can actually see the Big Bang. And that was 13.8 billion years ago. Looking out in space is looking back in time. And since we cannot see, since light has only had 13.8 billion years to travel, we can't see beyond that. Now, there may be much more universe than what we can see, and there probably is, but that's all we can see at the current time. So that's a limit to science. There's an edge. So here's the Andromeda. If you know where to look, you go up at night, out at night, and you look at the Great Square of Pegasus, otherwise known as the baseball diamond in the sky, and Andromeda, which is the great W or M, depending on the season. Halfway in between, you'll see a fuzzy blob the size of a quarter at arm's length. That's the oldest light you'll ever see. That light has been traveling through space for 2.5 billion years before plunging into your eye and being turned into a minus a tenth of a volt electrical signal that your brain says, light. Yeah, oh well. 2.5 million years, and it ends up as a chemistry experiment? Anyway, okay. And when we look out with telescopes, we can see further. This collection of galaxies is like 54 million years ago. And the Hubble Space Telescope, you had the person who ran the Hubble Deep Field. Here's the ultra deep field. 10,000 galaxies in this square. And this picture goes back, the reddest ones were 13 billion years ago. That's 1 billion years, well, 0.8 billion years after the start of the universe. These two guys, Arno Penzias and Bob Wilson, discovered the Big Bang. And they were hired by a communications company, AT&T. In those days, AT&T invested money in research. And they built that antenna to try to investigate communicating across the ocean by radio waves. They were going to use that antenna to bounce radio waves off the moon. And they were good scientists. They are amazingly good scientists. They turned on their antenna and it was noisy. Where was the noise coming from? And the noise was there all the time. They actually went so far to think, maybe the pigeons that live in our antenna, maybe the pigeon shit is emitting radio waves. And so they went in there, they're real scientists, they cleaned out the pigeon shit. The noise was still there. And so then Bob Wilson went to a talk at Princeton, and the guy that was doing the talk said essentially, you know, we don't think the universe started with a Big Bang. We think it's a continuous universe. But if it did start in a Big Bang, there'd be radio frequency noise in the microwave region of the spectrum. And Bob Wilson said, radio frequency noise in the microwave spectrum? Exactly matching what we're seeing? And he ran back and told Arno, and they published a paper, and they recently received the Nobel Prize, $1 million each, because he listened and he knew what to listen for, that he was looking at the birth of the universe. So this is a picture. When you look out at the night sky, you just see blackness between the stars because your eyes don't see microwaves. If you could see microwaves, there would be a glowing wall out there in microwaves. In fact, there is a glowing wall. And we translate that microwave glow into this picture of the entire sky. And the interesting thing is, we talk about microwaves in terms of their temperature, but the red portions of this plot are 100,000th of a degree Celsius, Kelvin, warmer than the average. And the blue places are 100,000th of a degree cooler. And the amazing thing is that this picture, every one of those cool places, the blue places, turns into clusters of galaxies. And the hot places don't. And with time, when we launch the James Webb Telescope, we'll go from this picture, which is a picture of the universe 300,000 years after the Big Bang, for reasons I'll tell you in a minute, till the first galaxies appear in the Hubble Deep Field. The James Webb Telescope will show us the time between this and the creation of the galaxies, and we call that now the Dark Ages, because there were no stars yet. And we'll actually get to watch the first stars in the universe form, because space is a time machine. Looking out in space is looking back in time. Now, what is this a picture of? According to our current model of the universe, and it's been verified by some experiments, the universe starts off as a hot explosion. How hot is it? It's so hot that even atoms can't exist. And not even nuclei can exist. But as space expands and cools, nuclei come into existence. Hydrogen and helium and lithium. And then as it cools, it takes 300,000 years to cool enough that hydrogen can form. And hydrogen, when it forms, takes the universe from a plasma, like if you look at a candle, that's a plasma, you can't see through it. You look at the sun, you can't see through the sun, it's a plasma. It takes it to hydrogen gas, which is transparent. So at 300,000 years after the Big Bang, the universe goes transparent. The last light that left travels for 13.8 billion years and arrives at our microwave receivers and tells us about the birth of the universe, which we can see. Oops. It tells us some interesting things. We were totally shocked to find out that what that light told us is that the universe is made of 4% of the energy in the universe is made of us, atoms, the things we thought the universe was made of. 23%, 6 times more, is made of something called dark matter, which attracts things by gravity, and we have no idea what it is. This is a great unknown in science, but we're doing experiments. We'll be able to figure out what that is at some point. We just don't know now. It's great to know that science doesn't know everything. We don't even know what most of the universe is made of. And then in about the year 2000, this new stuff was discovered, dark energy. And dark energy is the strangest stuff of all. You see, matter, atoms, and dark matter attract things by gravity. Dark energy repels things with gravity. We discovered by looking at the history of the universe that it started out fast, expanding in a giant explosion, everything going out fast, slowing down under gravity. And then, after 10 billion years or so, it started to speed up again. So right now, galaxies are moving apart faster and faster. And we hypothesize that's due to dark energy. We don't even know how to look for dark energy. So we're sort of in the dark in science about this. That's all knowable, we hope. But that edge of the universe, this radius of the visible universe, 13.8 billion light years, that's that right-hand edge over there. This is the radius of the universe. Beyond it, I call it the abyss. We don't know what's there. And if we look at, we can count up all the mass of the universe, and there's the universe right there. That's all the known mass in the universe right there. That's at that radius and that mass. Here's something interesting that this graph tells you. If the universe were a black hole, it would be there. This is where the line for black holes meets the line for the size of the universe. The universe is not a black hole. So there's one thing you learned today. If you're ever worried, are we in a black hole? No. That's good. It's a good thing to take away. You got to give something to take away. All right. All right, now we're going to go down to small. So in 1801, there's this youngster, Thomas Young. He translated the Rosetta Stone. He knew 16 ancient languages when he was 19 years old. And he did this experiment. He put light through 2 slits. And the amazing thing is, when you put light through one slit. You just take light and you take a pencil, two pencils, and you look at a light like those lights in my eyes right now, and you squeeze the pencils together, and the light spreads out. And that's due to quantum mechanics. And this is a picture of how the light spreads out. It spreads out into the smear. And then he did something really interesting. He opened a second slit next to the first one. So now there were two lights coming in. And when he opened the second slit, dark lines appeared. Light plus light equaled dark. That was unexpected. And that meant that light was a wave. Up to this time, people thought light was a particle. Now we think light's a wave. Well, it's not just light that's a wave. Recently, the National Institute of Science and Technology in Boulder, Colorado, took two beams of atoms and crossed the beams. You know, like in Ghostbusters, don't cross the beams. They crossed the beams of atoms, and this picture resulted. It turns out atoms are waves too. They're the ultimate particle. Here's this thing, you can bounce it off things, but it bounces off sometimes like it's a wave. So atoms are waves as well. You have a wavelength, and everything has a certain wavelength. The more massive it is, the shorter the wavelength. And that's what this bottom line is. This one here, this line is where any given mass turns into a wave. And that is an amazing line. By the way, if you have a flash drive in your pocket, if you're storing anything on a flash drive, the fundamental operating principle of that flash drive is that an electron in one place on the flash drive vanishes, goes through a place that it's prohibited from ever being, called an insulator, and appears on the other side in a storage bin, never having crossed the space in between. That's what quantum objects do. They disappear one place and reappear the other without traversing the space in between. You're depending on that every day that you use a flash drive. So these strange ideas in science show up in your pocket after a few decades. And that's the amazing story of modern science and engineering. Well, this graph can tell us some really interesting things. This point right here, that's where black holes and waves meet. That's a thing called the quantum black hole. And that's 10 to the minus 8th kilograms and 10 to the minus 33rd meters. It's really tiny. It's actually got a reasonable mass to it. And we can't ask questions in science about things that are smaller than the quantum limit. We can't ask about the inside of a black hole. We can't ask about things beyond the edge of the universe. The good news is the edge of the universe is moving outward at the speed of light. So with each year that goes on, our universe gets 1 light year bigger, which is kind of cool when you think about it. And so this diagram just lets you see these wonderful points. By the way, this thing down here, that's where the mass of the universe becomes a wave. That's where the universe behaves as a quantum thing. And that's really strange. So you have to realize that on this graph, the things we know about, nuclei, atoms, this is where all cells are, humans, mountains, and on to stars and planets. They all fall. Sorry, missed that. Oh well. Back. Oh, sorry about that. We'll go back. I missed my big graph. You notice everything sort of falls on this line here. Atoms, cells, humans, mountains, planets, stars. They're all made from atoms that are touching. Science started out knowing only about humans and mountains and the earth, and then in the 1800s, 1700s, we sort of extended down and we began to look at cells, and then 1900, we reached down here to atoms, and 1930s, we reached over to the nucleus. And so the history of science has been the history of pushing back these boundaries. So there are, as I said, there are other limits. Information can't go faster than the speed of light, and we can't go back in time before the Big Bang. So when you hear scientists talking about the inside of a black hole, what's beyond the edge of the universe, measurements that are smaller than the wavelength, and you'll hear them talking about these things, particles that go faster than the speed of light. You probably heard about that last year. There was this big thing. When a scientist finds a particle that goes faster than the speed of light, this is Nobel Prize material. Alas, that announcement, which you may have heard made all the papers, scientists find neutrinos going faster than the speed of light, turned out to be a bad connection in the electronics. You probably didn't read about that in the literature. And we really need in science the Nobel Booby Prize for people that jump too fast. You know? So when you hear about things like particles that go faster than the speed of light, be a scientist and say, show me, prove it. I doubt that. When you hear what happened before the Big Bang, we're really working to find out what happened before then, but we can't do it yet. Realize you're going beyond the edge of science. Is this the end of science? No. It's the edges where the interest is. These edges are where we're really pushing right now, and the history of science has been learning to go beyond the edges. But I thought you should know where these boundaries of science are. And the monks really like this because this just served to illustrate that there were other things that science couldn't do. And the things we needed the philosophers for, and those were ethics. What's ethical? How should you behave? Science can give you facts and measurements, and we can look at the span of the universe. But deciding what's the appropriate course of action in life, what's compassion, we need people beyond scientists to do that. And the monks were really glad to hear that because they've been working on that for 2,000 years and making some good progress. So anyway, if you'd like to learn more, I'm Paul Doherty. If you search for me online, you'll find there are 3 Paul Dohertys, and we vie for first place on Google listings. Who's ever written the most recent book? There's one who writes ancient Egyptian murder mysteries. There's one who writes Irish religious tracts, and there's one who writes science for 14-year-olds. I'm that one. So go find me online, look at my webpage. I have a couple hundred pages where I publish activities for you or for 14-year-olds to do that are safe and will let you learn science on your own. So thank you for listening to the Boundaries of Science. I think we have a few minutes for questions, so I'll stay here for questions.
Here's one.
Okay, yeah, questions.
So when you're looking at distant stars, how do you know the distance they are away from us?
That is such a great question. So the nearest stars, we view them from Earth, and as Earth goes around the sun, an interesting thing happens. I'm going to point at you, and as I move over here, my arm is changing angle. So as I look at you at some distance, and I'm the Earth on one side of the sun, which is in the middle of this platform, I see you against the background over there against 4P sight. I line you up with distant stuff. And now, half a year goes by, and I look at you again, and now you're up against global nimbus. Woohoo! And knowing this distance, I know the distance I moved, and using triangles, thank you, Greece. Thank you, Euclid. I can find out how far away you are. And so we step out from there. So we can go out 1,000 light years or so using trigonometry. And then we discovered that certain stars blink bright and dim, bright and dim. And the time it takes them to go bright and dim depends on their maximum brightness. So the period of these stars tells us how bright they are. And you may notice that if you take a light and it's bright nearby, as it goes further away, it gets dimmer. So we can use that, the C-feed variables. We can see those in distant galaxies. So we know the distance to the nearby C-feeds because of parallax, and we step out to the more distant galaxies. And then we use a similar thing. There's these supernovas that I showed you the one picture of. They're so bright, we can see a supernova out at towards the edge of the universe. It's so bright. And certain supernovas are always the same brightness, we think. And so we use their brightnesses, and that's how we get the distance. And that's what you can always ask a scientist. How do you know that? And I've got to give you the experiments. Did that answer your question? Okay, good.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So how do you know that those supernovas are always the same brightness?
Well, yeah, because we study the ones that we can measure the distance to by using the C-feeds. So the C-feed variables give us tremendous array of galaxies we know the distance to. And we watch hundreds of these particular supernovas. They have a special light curve that tells us, oh, this is a type 1a supernova as compared to 2 or 1b. That's a type 1a supernova. And all the hundreds we've seen are the same brightness. Now, it could be that in the age of the universe, things have changed and they're not the same brightness. And in that case, we'd be what's called wrong. So it turns out that there's another way to tell. Out there, this picture I showed you of the Big Bang, it had some spots that were bright and some spots that were dark. And the size of those spots also depends on the distance to the Big Bang. And the distance to that Big Bang based on those spots agrees with the distance based on the supernovas. So now we have two independent lines of evidence that are giving the same answer. For a while, you may not have known this, for a while around 1990s, scientists were really perplexed because we could measure the age of stars, we thought, and we found many stars that were older than the age of the universe. And we thought that was a bit strange, since they should be younger than the universe. And it turned out with time, our understanding of stars grew better and better, and their age grew younger and younger. And our understanding of the age of the universe got better and better, and the universe got older, until now, the oldest stars are younger than the universe. Whew. But you didn't read about that in the newspapers because scientists were so embarrassed by that number. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other
question here?
Okay, well, there's a question.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Doherty, for it's a great lecture. Quick question. I know that there's a limitation for what we understand what's in a black hole, but we can kind of study what's around the black hole. And I'm just wondering, from a purely layman's standpoint, learning what we have about the Higgs boson and antimatter, is there any correlation or understanding of perhaps what's at the edges and whether matter's turning into antimatter or something like that? You know.
Yeah, so around a black hole, by the way, how do you go about seeing a black hole? You can see it by its gravity effect, but also when matter falls into a black hole, it accelerates. And when you accelerate something with an electric charge, like a proton or an electron or an ion, when you accelerate a charge, it gives off radiation. And so as matter falls into a black hole, it gives off bright radiation, and the X-ray even. So we have X-ray telescopes up there that are looking at the matter falling into black holes. And that energy that it's giving off, actually, here's the amazing thing. It's a great source of energy. If we had a black hole near us, it would be just a wonderful source of energy. You drop matter into it, essentially 40% of the rest mass, you know, Einstein, E equals mc squared, right? You can turn matter into pure energy. And a nuclear bomb turns about 10% of the matter into energy. That's what a nuclear bomb does. It turns mass into energy. The black hole is 4 times better than a nuclear bomb at turning matter into energy. Alas, the energy it creates is X-rays and it sterilizes the planet. Oh, well, okay. Minor little problems. But that interesting thing is that those X-rays then, as they're going through, if they have enough energy, if the X-ray collides with something, it can turn into matter, electron, and antimatter, anti-electrons. And in fact, we don't have to wait for black holes to make antimatter. They do. And we are now doing an experiment at CERN, the Large Hadron Collider. And what they do in the Large Hadron Collider, they make antimatter. They make antiprotons, and they make anti-electrons. And what they're doing, what they'll be doing in the next few months, and I got my fingers crossed, they're going to combine the antiprotons and anti-electrons. Now, when you combine a proton and an electron, you get hydrogen, which Carl Sagan says hydrogen was created in the Big Bang, an odorless, colorless gas that given 13.8 billion years and gravity creates people. That's not a bad resume for hydrogen. We're going to make anti-hydrogen, an anti-proton, which is negative, a regular proton is positive, and an anti-electron, which is positive. We're going to make it, and we're going to study its spectrum. And all scientists predict two things about this. This is what scientists should do. We should say, this is what we think is going to happen. Then you do the experiment, you find out what happens, and then some scientist said, well, I knew that. What they're going to do, first of all, they're going to drop the hydrogen. And every physicist predicts, drop the anti-hydrogen. Every physicist predicts the anti-hydrogen will fall under gravity. We've never done the experiment. Let's do the experiment. The other thing we're going to do is look at its spectrum. We think that anti-hydrogen will look identical to hydrogen in the light that it gives out. We've never done the experiment. If there's a difference in the light it gives out, then by looking around the black holes, we'll be able to see what's anti-hydrogen and what's hydrogen. And that would be a really cool thing to do. And in fact, around the black holes, you can have protons and antiprotons and Higgs bosons and anti-Higgs bosons. So yeah, they do create antimatter just from that huge amount of energy from stuff falling in. At the centers of galaxies, the supermassive black holes eat stars for lunch. And when they eat a star, they give off enough X-rays to sterilize every planet in the center of the whole galaxy. So I think we're glad to be out here in the boonies of the galaxy. Yeah, over there.
I have one. We'll do one here, and then that'll be the last question.
Okay, great. Okay, good.
In the infrared picture of the galaxy or the universe, it looked like a pancake. So it looked brighter in the middle, and it kind of fuzzed out at the end. What's in the middle? And is it one star, many stars? And are we orbiting like the rings of Saturn? Or
okay, so this is in the picture of our galaxy in the infrared.
Yes.
Yeah. So our galaxy. Yeah. So in our picture of our galaxy in the infrared. So there are three basic kinds of galaxies, and here's a cool thing. You know, the internet and the web have changed the way we do science. We have hundreds of thousands of pictures of galaxies, and there are three basic kinds. There are spherical galaxies, which are spherical, and they're elliptical. And there's spiral galaxies, like the one we live in. And a spiral galaxy has a big ball of stars in the middle, and then a rotating disk, an orbiting disk of stars around the spiral rings, which we're in. And then the third category is irregular, which means none of the above. And we're using people who love to study astronomy, but haven't become grad students. Normally, we just hire grad student slaves to do this. But we allow internet interested people to go out, and you look at these pictures and you say, that's a spiral, click. That's an elliptical, click. But many people voting on the same one gets us to classify hundreds of thousands of galaxies and separate out, or this one is none of the above. And then all the scientists go and look at them. Well, what's this none of the above one? So indeed, you've got it right. There's a central bulge with a black hole in the middle, a gigantic black hole in the middle. And that bulge has strong gravity, which holds in orbit the disk of other stars, of which our sun is one. And you can ask me more details later. So you said there's one more question?
Yes, last question here.
Okay, last question.
Obviously, you know, we haven't really had the same amount of scientific training that the guys who are over in Switzerland at CERN are, as they create things like the Higgs boson. I was, in looking at all the different news reports on it, something was sort of, I felt not answered. And I was curious as to what your take was on it. They mentioned that this particle that they created in this gigantic cyclotron under Switzerland gave mass to everything else. Like this one particle, when it breaks down, bestows mass, and that's why we have mass. Did they say why the Higgs boson did that and what gave the Higgs boson mass?
Yeah, they gave a nice model, actually. And it turns out that there are various fields in the world. There's the gravity field that we make up, where the Earth reaches out and grabs you with its gravity fields and pulls you to Earth, especially if you step off Half Dome. And there's the electric field where it moves electrons around. And there's the Higgs field. And the Higgs field is a field which interacts with every other particle in the universe. And the interaction is of the form of molasses, that moving in the Higgs field slows you down. And the classic example is that as you walk through a dinner party, like last night out there, you're walking along, there's a certain speed you could walk across that empty space out there right now. But when there are people there, you stop and you interact with them by talking, the voice field, if you will. And when you stop and talk to someone, your average speed across that space is slower. So there's this thing called the Higgs field, and the Higgs particle is the particle of that field. By the way, the particle of light is called the photon, and that's what we see with. And the particle of electricity is called the photon, and that's what we see with. The particle of gravity is called the graviton. We're still looking for it. It hasn't been discovered yet, but we hypothesize it's there. The particle of the Higgs field is the Higgs boson, and that was the big story. We thought there was a Higgs field which caused things to slow down because they interacted with it, but we hadn't discovered the particle yet. So there are other particles. There are more particles to find. And in fact, one of the great quotes of mountaineers is one of the first ascender of Annapurna, after he climbed Annapurna, and he was asked, what are you going to do next? And his answer was, there are other Annapurnas in the hearts of men. So as soon as you discover something, look onward to the next thing to discover. Go out and discover that. So I think that's a good recipe for life and a good way to end. So come visit the Exploratorium in San Francisco. We'll make science fun. I guarantee it.
Thank you so much. That was excellent. Big thank you to Paul, and a thank you to all of our speakers we've had over the last couple of days. That was really fun. Great way to end our keynotes. So here's what's going on the rest of the day. We're going to have lunch at the pool, right? Somebody confirm that. Yes, we're going to have lunch at the pool, same as yesterday. Then we have 3 sets of breakout sessions starting at 1. At 4 back in here for the Miva roadmap, and that's a much more informal. Rick will be back on the stage, John Birchmore, David Hubbard, and Brennan Heidi. And that's more of an informal, it's the usual, right? It's questions, answers, discussion, anything goes. Okay, so that was quickly covering again the roadmap discussion from yesterday and what was on the slides, and then open up for Q&A. And then back in here for at 5 for our closing drinks and prizes. That's all I've got. Please, if you haven't already filled in the, let me see. So we have the 2 forms in front of you. We have the sign up for the 149 to get a free ticket next week. And if you fill that in next year, if you fill that in, hand it to somebody at registration. And also, we really do want those feedback forms. Thanks again. Bye.